Good evening. This is Ed Reed, Program Director with Fair Count. I hope that you and your family are safe and healthy during this time, and we're delighted that residents from across the state of Mississippi are joining us this evening for a grand discussion on the critical importance of participating in the 2020 election. Fair Count is a nonprofit 501c3 organization focused on increasing civic and voter participation across the state of Mississippi and also across the entire nation. We want to ensure that we are seen in the 2020 census. We know that the 2020 census is recently concluded in terms of the counting, but that doesn't stop our work to ensure that we are fairly and accurately counted in that process. But we also want to make sure that we're heard by casting our ballots in the 2020 election. Before we begin the conversation, I'd like to remind everyone at home and also on the call tonight, our speakers, that Fair Count is a nonpartisan, nonprofit organization and as such does not advocate for the defeat, election, or re-election of any person from any political party. We have an exciting slate of leaders from across Mississippi tonight. I'm elated to be joined by three wonderful ladies who are doing great work in their own right to ensure that folks are seen and heard in 2020. This is an interactive conversation tonight, so if at any point during the conversation you come across a question that you had that you wanted to get a question to at some point in 2020 regarding the upcoming election, you can press 9 on your phone to get a question asked here live on the call tonight. I want to get started by introducing our special guests, and I'll have them introduce themselves very quickly here before we get into the conversation. I'll start with Ms. Rachel Mays with Southern Echo. Would you like to say hello to our listeners tonight?
Thank you, Ed. Good evening, Mississippi, and thank you for joining. And thanks to Fair Count ZOTV for collaborating with Southern Echo and other stakeholders in Mississippi to elevate the awareness and importance of voting on Tuesday, November 3rd.
Thank you so much, Rachel. For those of you just joining the call tonight, you're on a live telephone town hall conversation discussing voter participation and what it means for Black families across the state of Mississippi. We want to hear your questions and your concerns, so press 9 to raise your hand to ask a question. Again, all you have to do is press 9 on your phone to ask a question. I now want to turn to Ms. Shalonda Spencer to introduce her. Shalonda, would you like to say hello to our listeners tonight? Ms. Spencer, are you there? Or maybe you're on mute. We're going to try to come back to Ms. Spencer. We're delighted that thousands of you have already joined the conversation tonight, and some of you are already getting in line to ask questions. So thank you. We're looking for a very robust conversation here. I want to turn to Ms. Blackman. Ms. Blackman is with Black Voters Matter in the state of Mississippi. Would you like to say hello to our listeners tonight?
Yes, I certainly would. Hello, everyone. My name is Carol Blackman. I'm the Mississippi coordinator for Black Voters Matter Fund, and I'm one of the coordinators who represent Black Voters Matter in 11 states and mostly in the Southeast across the nation. And thank you, Fair Count, for inviting us to be a part of this conversation.
Thank you so much, Ms. Blackman, for that. I want to go back now to see Ms. Spencer. Ms. Spencer, we have you.
Yes, I accidentally got kicked off. I apologize due to
no problem. We're glad you're back. Would you like to say hello to our listeners tonight? Ms. Spencer is the Policy and Government Director with Trying Together.
Hello, everyone. My name is Shalonda Spencer. I am delighted to be on this call with you all and to share our wealth of knowledge along with other colleagues who I've had the privilege of meeting before in the past as well.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Ms. Spencer. So if you'd like to get in line to ask one of these distinguished ladies a question tonight, press 9 on your phone at any time. But before we go to the conversation between them and your questions, I'd like to ask one poll question. We're going to have one poll question tonight. Each participant can answer by pressing a button on your phone. So you can be looking at TV or sitting on your couch tonight, and you can participate in the conversation. And we'll share the results here in just a few minutes. But please wait to hear all of the answers before you press a button. So the poll question is, what is your plan to vote in the 2020 election? Again, what is your plan to vote in the 2020 election? You plan to vote absentee, then you're going to press 1. If you plan to vote on election day, press 2. If you've already voted via absentee, you can press 3. So if you want to vote via absentee, that's your plan. You're going to press 1. If you plan to vote on election day, press 2. If you've already voted via absentee, then you can press 3 at this time. So we're going to give those results a few seconds to get in. It looks like most of the folks right now on the line are saying that they're looking to, looks like about over 60% people are interested in voting on election day. So I'm interested to know, and Ms. Spencer, Ms. Blackman, Ms. Mays, is that a normal trend in the state of Mississippi where the overwhelming majority of folks are looking to vote on election day?
This is Shalana Spencer. I can start it out. I feel like that a lot of people are excited about this election. I feel like that a lot of younger people, from things that I've gathered, are very excited. But due to COVID, I know like a lot of people who have definitely turned in their absentee ballot, especially like your people with pre-existing conditions, or like very precautious of the dynamic of what COVID will do to, especially a lot of the older people. But I do think that a lot of people will really turn out the polls. I mean, Mississippi has been showing out so far, even just by going to already voting absentee. So,
awesome. Anybody else would like to add to that?
Yes, this is Carol Blackman. I would just like to say I think that that's pretty close to the norm. However, I do think that, as Shalonda indicated, that the number of people who will be voting absentee this year will far surpass what has happened in past years. But Mississippi has absentee balloting or absentee voting, and you have to have an excuse for that. So quite often that creates an issue where many people do go to the polls rather than opting to vote absentee without an excuse.
Yeah, that's a really good point. So glad you brought up that about needing to have that excuse, because it looks like about 12% of people that responded tonight on the line, and again, we have thousands of people participating, said that only 12% were looking to vote absentee coming up, but 27% of people said they had already voted. So, and then 61% of folks said that they were waiting until election day to do so. So those, I think, are some promising and encouraging numbers. Again, if you're listening into the conversation tonight, we're glad that you have decided to participate and listen in. We want to ensure that we have a really robust discussion about the critical importance of voter participation and what it means for families across Mississippi. If you want to ask a question of our special guest tonight, press 9. If something has come across and you're like, oh, that brings up a question that I want to ask, press 9 on your phone to get in line to ask a question live on the line tonight. But before we get to our live questions, I did want to go to our panelists, and I want to bring them into some conversation. I want to go to Ms. Blackman. One of the core values of Black Voters Matter is the belief in effectiveness of, quote, authentic messaging, which speaks to our issues, connects with our hopes, and affirms our humanity. What does that mean exactly, and what does that kind of authentic messaging sound like in Mississippi?
First of all, let me just say that Black Voters Matter, the leadership of Black Voters Matter Fund just completed a 3-day tour here in Mississippi where we work with many different partners who are across the state to get out in the community, to do some caravanning, some rallying with folk, lifting up the voices of people in communities. We have motorcades in several areas of the state. And when we talk about authentic messaging and our issues. We are talking about jobs, good jobs that afford families a quality of life that is due to us all. We're talking about housing. We're talking about good schools and respect for one another and respect for the power that we have as everyday people as we go to the polls to vote. And we have to also think about these issues as human rights for everyone and how it actually makes a huge difference in how we approach our everyday lives.
Well, thank you so much, Ms. Blackman. I appreciate that, and I'm going to follow up on that, and you touched on this a little bit, but I'm interested, what type of outreach has Black Voters Matter been involved in to increase voter participation? And this could be in Mississippi, but I know that you all are very active in many other states, particularly across the Southeast as well.
Yes. So a part of what we do is to provide resources to community groups that are on the ground, because Black Voters Matter does not have the human capacity to be everywhere at the same time. So we provide resources to help the people who are doing the work in the community to actually reach out to folk at their level so that they're able to get to the polls. They're able to do power building, sharing love, not just at election time, though, but we're talking year-round. We're talking 365 days a year. And then, when it's a leap year, it's a little bit more. But one of our goals is to help to build the capacity of folk to be in their community and to help give voice to the voiceless, to also provide opportunities for people to, when it is election time, to get to the polls. When it's census time, to help them to get their census forms back in a timely manner. And so we are just wanting to be with people, not with folk who represent a different kind of culture, but to people who are real people on the ground who need to have a little bit of additional support, a little push to get them moving to a point where they realize that they do, yes, have a voice.
Thank you so much, and I really like that about the power building, and that's something that we are very much interested in at Fair Count, to ensure that we're building this infrastructure and not being extractive in the work that we do. So you all have been great partners in that work, and we're so glad that we share those values. So thank you for your insight. For those who are just joining us tonight, go ahead.
I would like to just add one other statement to that. We sure. Always use a quote by Dr. Martin Luther King: "Power at its best is love implementing the demands of justice, and justice at its best is power correcting everything that stands against love."
I love it. Thank you for adding that. So
sure.
Powerful. Wow. Welcome to this interactive conversation with local leaders from across Mississippi tonight. Again, if you would like to ask a question, maybe her remarks have sparked a question in your head about voting and processes across Mississippi. Maybe you haven't voted yet. You have a question about civic engagement or voter participation. Press 9 on your phone. All you got to do is press 9 to get in line to ask a question. We're going to now go to Ms. Mays, Ms. Rachel Mays. And so we certainly love the work that you're doing at Southern Echo, but how does Southern Echo go about empowering African-American, vulnerable, low-wealth, marginalized communities in Mississippi? Ms. Mays, are you on? I don't know if she's on mute. Give her a second. All right, we're going to come back to Ms. Mays here in a second. Ms. Spencer, are you still on with us?
Yes, I am.
All right, well, we're going to go to a question for you at this point and see if we can get Ms. Mays back on the line. But, thank you for sort of the really robust work that you've done across many different fields. But, as you have gone through the work that you've done, what messages are the most effective for making people understand the importance of voting in public policy?
Oh, that's a really good question. Over the years, I've had the opportunity working in local government, state, and, federal. And what I've come to realization is that everything starts local. No matter, every election is important. Of course, presidential election is important, but your local government is just as important as any other election. And so one of the things I always try to use is my voice in getting people to not just look at federal elections and Senate elections, that these, the high-rise elections that we often, get excited about, but also pay attention to what's on the ground and building momentum there, because I always tell people that's where your bread and butter comes from. That's what you interact with all the time, your mayor, your city council, your some of them they're aldermen, depending on what part of Mississippi you reside in. And that is one of the things I always push, because that's where local legislation starts. Meaning, those are the people who regulate your light bills, regulate your utility. They regulate how, if you have Wi-Fi. If you have access to Wi-Fi in your area. Those are policy issues that we don't often look at or we don't often think about. We automatically go to we want to. Of course, everybody don't want taxes increased, but that is always the number one topic that we talk about. And then we got to think education is a policy, healthcare is a policy. All of these things that I've just said, but then it goes beyond that. And so I often have to make sure that when I'm encouraging people to go vote, kind of like what you were saying earlier, being nonpartisan is important, because what you want somebody to focus on the issues. You want somebody to know if they're speaking your language, because you want somebody to be able to be that advocate for you when they're on their legislation, when they passing that bill, or somebody, and your representative to be that voice. And your vote is that voice, because once you cast your voice at that ballot, at the polling place, then you are making that person responsible for being their voice, being your advocate when they get in that position.
I love it. So thank you so much for making that so plain. I think that's really important, especially as you talk about the local leadership and the issues that evolve out of that, and making those just as important. So we appreciate that. I want to talk, I think you have a really interesting and positive story. But, how would you describe the impact, positive and negative, that early life adversity had on your later life activism?
Repeat that last bit again, the last question.
Yeah, sure. So what I was saying, how would you describe the impact, positive and negative, that your early life adversity has had on your later life activism?
So I grew up in Mississippi my whole life, and I grew up a statistic. You want to be realistically when you comparing it to society, and what I mean by that is I grew up in a single parent home, and my father wasn't really active in my life, and I didn't understand the method of education up until I relocated. We relocated when I was younger because we moved around a lot due to financial circumstances, because growing up in a single parent home, of course, I was also the statistic of social economic, injustice. And so for me, when I got a taste of Jackson State, I love, and I had so many seeds being poured into me, and also throughout my matriculation of life with mentors and people who literally just became my adversaries. They became my voices. Those are people who I cherish to my heart to this day. And so for me, I decided to go. I always tell people, I think it chose me. I didn't choose it because of my life circumstances and how I grew up. I started realizing that nobody was my voice for me growing up in my home, around family, but I had community to be my voice. And so I felt like the way that I give back is by being that voice to my community. One of the analogies that I live by within myself is that my community is my responsibility. No matter where I am, no matter where I reside, even when I've left Mississippi, and currently I live in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, but I'm always doing work in Mississippi. When people call me, I'm always on the ground at any chance I know that I can be there, because my community will always be my responsibility. And so for me, I feel like my activism was my childhood, my upbringing empowered my activism. It gave me my voice, and it gave me a sense of power that I think that if I had not grown up the way I did, I wouldn't be where I am today.
Awesome. Yeah, what a phenomenal story, and we're so glad and grateful for your activism now, and I'm sure it's changing lives on a daily basis. So thank you so much, Ms. Spencer, for being on. I'm told that Ms. Mays is back on. So Ms. Mays, I think we can hear you now. My question to you to get you in here on the conversation was, how does Southern Echo go about empowering African-American, vulnerable, low wealth, and marginalized communities across Mississippi?
Thanks, Ed. Can you hear me now?
Yes, ma'am. Sure can.
Awesome. Okay. So Southern Echo, we emphasize the importance of building strong community organizations through effective community organizing work as the means through which to empower communities, and we seek to enable communities to hold political, economic, education, and environmental decision makers accountable to the needs of all citizens. We also believe in the propagation of an inclusive society where all communities receive the support that they need, and all communities have equitable representation in governmental leadership. One of the ways of accomplishing this is high voter turnout from communities of color. Given voter disenfranchisement, voter suppression, misinformation, and voter intimidation, we work to mobilize and organize the strongest voter turnout possible using an outreach strategy involving the development of a comprehensive communications plan so that all voters, whether they're infrequent voters, unregistered voters, reluctant voters, they know about the election deadlines, important issues involving the election, and any laws involving election.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Ms. Mays. We thank you for the work that you're doing through Southern Echo. Very transformative across the state of Mississippi. So thank you. Thank you again to those at home that are listening in, and those of you that have gotten in line to ask a question. We're now going to go to some of those questions here on the line. Our first question of tonight is going to go to Ms. Evelyn Dillard out of Adams, Mississippi. Evelyn Dillard out of Adams, Mississippi, who has a really great question. Ms. Dillard, you're live on the line with us tonight if you'd like to ask your question to our guest.
Yes, I would love to. I'm glad to be in on the conversation with you all tonight. I'm glad that the call came through that I could explain my situation as being 100% disabled. I don't have transportation of my own. My income is very, very low. When I finish paying bills, there's not much or nothing left, not even to pay a ride on the transit bus. And I don't have transportation to the poll. No one ever come by or call to let me know if you need a ride. The Board of Aldermen, supervisors, or whoever is campaigning for whoever is coming around to take people to vote. Seems like they bypass my house, and I've had to stand on my porch with my walking cane to see if anyone would come along and see if they'll take me to vote. A couple times, I know at least one time I didn't get to vote, and that kind of upset me, because I am a registered voter, and I love to participate in the elections, whether it's local or federal or whatever. State, it doesn't matter. I want to cast my ballot, but sometime, maybe twice, I didn't get a chance to vote, and that kind of worked on my nerves, too.
Right. So I'm wondering if Ms. Dillard, that we certainly appreciate your interest and your wanting to participate in the election, and we are able to make sure we convey the information on how to get a ride to the polls in Mississippi directly to Ms. Dillard offline tonight as well. And I'm wondering if one of our special guests on the line, if you know of a hotline or a toll-free number of some organization that's providing rides to the polls in Mississippi that Ms. Dillard or folks like Ms. Dillard on the call listening tonight might be able to call in to get that service provided for them.
Where are you located? Where's your location?
Ms. Dillard is in Adams, Mississippi.
I mean, I wish
is that in Adams County, or is that Natchez, or what?
Adams County. But are any of your organizations providing rides to the polls?
We are working, and this is Rachel with Southern Echo. We are working with churches throughout the state to coordinate that. So if you could, back office, take her phone number, then
Sure.
we can follow up with her to coordinate a ride to the poll.
Yeah, we absolutely will ensure that we circle back with Ms. Dillard because we want to make sure that she's able to be heard in 2020 to get her ballot cast this year. So thank you so much for that. We are now going to turn to another question from one of our audience members. We have Mr. Savage, who is live on the line from Claiborne, Mississippi. Mr. Savage out of Claiborne, Mississippi, you are live on the line with us tonight. If you would like to go with your question.
Okay, my question was, and it goes back to Mrs. Dillard. You know, as an educator, I understand the importance of voting, and in the lower areas like Mid-Cleveland County, Jefferson County, the Delta area, these are all places, counties that are turning red. They're for Republican, and I can't understand how Mississippi is a Republican state as many empowered black people and whites, and they still vote Republican. Some of the issues is that they can't get to the polls, like the personal head I just saw a minute ago. We just heard a minute ago. And they don't understand the importance of going out and vote locally, choosing officials that are going to bring industry and better the community for everybody, because that brings jobs. Businesses look at the education system. They look at the policing. They look at how the economy is in the county. And Claiborne County has a rich economy.
Well, we thank you, Mr. Savage, for that question. We appreciate it, and about how to drive up turnout in the black community, which is important to us. I want to just emphasize again, we are a nonpartisan organization, so we don't work to elect any one person or defeat any one person. We are here just to ensure people have an opportunity to participate in the process. So I'm wondering, and some of our special guests tonight and speakers have already hit on this, but what are some of the things that we could do to make it plain to people, really encourage them to participate in this process? One of the things Mr. Savage talked about was resources for communities, and we know a lot of that has to do with being counted in the census. And I know the time has lapsed already to be counted, but I'm hoping that many people on the call tonight have called in, did participate in that. So those things really have to go together. Being counted in the census and also voting. Anybody want to add any comments to any one of our special guests?
This is Carol Blackman, and I would just like to add that one of the things, as I mentioned earlier, that Black Voters Matter does is to provide resources in communities to organizations that are engaged in helping to get folk to the polls to vote, to get them registered, and also to assist with completion of the census. And so in that regard, we have 25 partners that we work with across the state. And so and I just pulled one of their numbers in regards to October, which is actually Absentee Ballot Awareness Month. And I have a phone number for people like Ms. Dillard who are looking for rides to the poll, and that number is 866-427-4339. That is 866-427-4339, and they're providing rides to the poll each day during the week.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Ms. Blackman, for that.
Only, certainly.
Thank you for sharing that. We really appreciate you sharing that number. I'm sure a lot of other folks on the call tonight are interested to know how they can receive a ride to the poll as well. We're going to go now to Madison, Mississippi. It looks like Elena James out of Madison, Mississippi. Miss James, you're live on the call tonight if you'd like to go forth with your question.
Well, my question is like they were speaking on TV that the voters, the absentee voters, would be total destroyed.
So I think Ms. James' question would be around, the protection of absentee voting. Is it a safe, is it a secure process in Mississippi? We understand that you do have to have an excuse for that. So maybe it's a good time if one of our speakers, if you want to, talk about how you feel about the process voting absentee, maybe what some of those common excuses are that people use to vote absentee in Mississippi. Anybody want to chime in?
Yep, it's Carol Blackman again. And I'd just like to say that I voted absentee already. For those of us who are 65 or older, that is our excuse. And so when I went in to vote and they asked for my excuse, that is what I gave to them. It has been done for many years, and I don't think it's going to destroy the system that is in place. Actually, since there are so many potential opportunities in other voting processes, I think if we are voting absentee, particularly in person, that we're ensured that our paper ballots will be counted.
Awesome. Thank you for that. Anybody else want to chime in?
I think she covered it.
Awesome. All right. Well, I think we're going to go to another. We have. It looks like out of Aberdeen, Mississippi, we have Miss Anita Ewing on the phone. Miss Anita Ewing, we're going to go to you live on the line. If you would like to ask your question to our guest tonight.
Good evening, and thank you all so much. I almost hung up on the call, but I'm glad I didn't. My name is Anita, and my question is, can a person who has been incarcerated vote? If they've been out, I don't know, several years, maybe 1, 2, 3, 4, or more, can they vote? Because someone asked today, and I tried to answer them best I could because I was thinking that they couldn't. Now, I know of a person who was voting, but the next thing I knew from what they told me, they could no longer vote like the regular citizens who go in to vote. They would have to be pulled off to the side, writing on some type of ballot, I guess on a sheet of paper. I don't think it was a ballot, which sounds like something's not going to be counted there. So I just want to know, can they vote?
So
thank you so much for that. Yeah, go ahead and chime in. Sure thing.
So to answer that question, just because a person has been incarcerated does not mean they're ineligible to vote. But what makes you ineligible to vote in Mississippi is if you committed a disenfranchising crime. You can go onto the Secretary of State's website, and there will be a list of 22, I think they just added one more, it's 23 now, disenfranchising crimes. If they've committed any one of those 23, they are ineligible to vote. They cannot go to the polls. It does not mean, and that does not mean, like I know you said something about them being incarcerated. Just because they've been incarcerated, they just got to make it sure that whatever their crime was does not fit into their 23 descriptions. Then, if they will, if one of those 23 descriptions fits into that, you need to contact their representative so that they could try to help them get reinstated back to vote. And that's just by going to speak to the representative, letting them know what their crime was, letting them know that they want to get their voting rights back. And what's going to happen, they're going to go through a legislation process, and that legislation process then goes up to the governor. So that's something that if that person would like to start, if they've committed one of those 1 in 23 disenfranchisement crimes, there's something that they can start trying to work on currently now. But that's just I just kind of gave like a background and also a current of what to do next kind of scenario, and I hope that helps.
And I want to list off those 23 items that prevent people from voting in Mississippi.
Please.
Okay. Voter fraud, murder, rape, bribery, theft, arson, obtaining money or goods under false pretense, perjury, forgery, embezzlement, bigamy, armed robbery, extortion, felony bad check, felony shoplifting, larceny, receiving stolen property, robbery, timber larceny, unlawful taking of a motor vehicle, statutory rape, carjacking or larceny under lease or rental agreement. So those are the 23 crimes that keep people that are eligible to vote in Mississippi, that keeps them from voting.
Wow, such a extensive list and such a huge process of disenfranchisement there. So thank you all for articulating that and explaining that, because I know that process is very different from state to state. And so making that clear on what the process is in Mississippi. I know we had, I think, a bunch of questions come in tonight regarding that. And so I want to go to a question now from Starkville, Mississippi, from Miss Brittany Perkins. Miss Brittany Perkins, we're going to have you live. You're live on the line now if you want to ask your question.
Hi. Thank you. My question is, in Mississippi, how do you verify your registration in the polling place where you're supposed to vote for in-person elections?
Okay, you can go to the Secretary of State website and the Mississippi Secretary of State website, and you can go. Once you get on there, you will see a link that says where's my polling place, and you just type in your address, which will be the address, your street address, or then the city, and then the county sometimes, and it'll let you know where you go to go vote and where your location is.
Awesome. Thank you for that. I'm sure that that's also answered some other questions that folks have had about, how figuring out where they need to go to make sure that their voice is heard. I want to thank you to those on the line that are listening in terms of the questions. We are not able to get to all of the questions this evening, but be sure that our team on the ground is going to follow up with you to make sure that we get you the responses to the questions, because we had so many people listening in. We just not have enough time to get to all the questions, but we'll make sure we follow up with everybody individually as well. We're going to now enter our lightning round of closing comments from our special guests, and I'm so elated that they took out time tonight from their very busy schedules at this time. We're about 13 days away from the election, and I know they're doing tremendous work, and so we appreciate their time. So I want to call on them to do a 30-second call to action for our guests that are listening in tonight. I'm going to start with Ms. Spencer.
My call to action would be for you all to ensure that your family, your friends, your loved ones, your co-workers, anybody that's attached to you that you know personally, and even though those you may not know personally, people who want to be engaged, make sure they are civically engaged even after this election, but also ensure that they have the transportation that they need and the resources to go vote. And that's just my call to action of what I would like to see happening across the state of Mississippi.
Thank you so much, Ms. Spencer, and thank you for joining us tonight. Ms. Blackman, what's your call to action for our listening audience tonight?
My call to action is that first of all, that everyone does vote, and secondarily, that when they do vote, that they vote all the way down the ballot, because we have heard already about the value of voting in the local elections. But I think in addition to that, this year we have 3 ballot initiatives, ballot measures that we should be voting on. One of those is dealing with medical marijuana in the state of Mississippi, and from everything that I've heard from the medical community, that we should be voting in support of this measure, and that's ballot measure number 1. And to vote in support of it, you have to vote 2 steps. First, for approval or for either of the 65 or 65A, and then you have to vote for one or the other. And to vote in support of this very much needed medical marijuana legislation that is not making it where marijuana is on the street, you would vote for measure number 65. And then for ballot measure 2, our state legislature had a little bit of infinite wisdom this year, so they created a resolution to eliminate Mississippi's what I call Jim Crow law that does require all statewide elected officials to not only win the majority vote, the popular vote, but to also win the most votes in the majority of the Mississippi House of Representative districts, in the 122 House of Representative districts. And the legislature has put that before the people. So we need to vote yes to eliminate that law. And the third thing is the statewide ballot measure 3 related to the state flag. And it's a flag referendum. Y'all know that we've had this state flag with the Civil War battle emblem on it for over 106 years, I believe. And now it's been retired. We need to vote for this new flag so that the people who want the old flag back will not be able to easily do that. I've heard that some people don't like the way the new flag looks. Well, there are a number of things we don't like the way that it looks, but we need to think of what it does for us and our children and our grandkids.
Thank you, Ms. Blackman. We're going to now go to our last special guest, Ms. Mays. Ms. Rachel Mays, would you like to give us a 30-second call to action?
Yes. I want to highlight that we have until October the 31st for in-person absentee ballot, in-person voting. That's your circuit clerk's office will be open until 5 p.m. for in-person absentee voting. And then on November the 3rd, we have, that's the final day for mail-in absentee ballots. So just please, everyone, go out and vote. And if you're in question as to whether or not you qualify for absentee voting, contact your circuit clerk's office, and they will share whether or not you are eligible. Please utilize that option, but also remember to go out and vote on November 3rd. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Mays, and again, thank you to our 3 special guests. I'd like to close with some reminders. Again, Fair Count has appreciated your attendance tonight in this Tele-Town Hall event, spreading the message about voter participation. And as a reminder, we are a nonpartisan, nonprofit organization, so we don't advocate for the defeat, election, or reelection of any person from any political party. If you have not voted yet, please make sure you make a plan to vote today. You can find out more information about voting at faircount.org /vote, or you can visit vote.org. If you wait a second at the very end of this call tonight, you'll be able to leave a message detailing why voting is so important to you and your family. Remember, let's be seen and heard in 2020. Again, on behalf of Fair Counts and our special guest tonight, thank you for joining tonight's call and have a wonderful evening.